So my name is Emma Louie. I just want to say hi to everyone and welcome you and thank you so much for coming. I'm a water and social justice activist as well as a holistic health practitioner. I live near Wakefield in Quebec on unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territory, and I'll be facilitating this discussion today. So just really want to thank you for joining. The weather is really nice outside, so appreciate you taking the time. Well, it's nice out here anyway. I don't know where everybody is joining from, but it's really nice out here, so really appreciate you taking the time to join us. We're gonna keep mics and cameras off for the presentation to save on bandwidth, but I see some folks with their cameras on, and if you want to turn your camera on right now to say a quick hello, I invite you to do that. I'd also invite you to introduce yourselves in the chat box, so you can put your name, your pronouns, where you're joining from, and any group you're part of or any issues that you work on, and I'll just put that list of things in the chat box now. Okay, so it's there. So yeah, feel free to introduce yourselves. I recently became a member of Biblioterre, though I've been learning and engaging with the project since last February, and I'm really excited to be on this webinar with you all. The agenda for today is going to be quite simple. We're going to have a presentation by Jen Korish, and then so that's going to be about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll do a Q&A because we really want to hear from you, and then we'll just bring in other members of Biblioterre. So that's Kelsey Cheslock, Rob Cole, and Paul Brown, who's also doing the tech for this webinar. So thanks to Paul for that. We'll be taking questions through the chat. So if throughout Jen's presentation you have any questions, then just put in the chat and I'll make a note of them, and then I'll read them out during the Q&A for Jen and other members to respond to. This webinar, as you can probably see, is being recorded. So if you're not comfortable being recorded, you can just be sure to keep your camera off. And then, yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about why we're doing this webinar and the framing around it. So many of us on this webinar, I recognize some names and some new names, which is really great. But many of us on this webinar have been working on the climate crisis and social justice issues for a long time, or been interested in them. The climate crisis is an intersecting crisis with racism, and we're seeing that come up a lot, particularly with anti-Black racism in the last month or so. It's also linked to colonization and patriarchy, and they're all connected to the crisis of capitalism. And the COVID-19 pandemic is really highlighting the inequities created by capitalism and the very glaring failings of this system. So as things open up, we really need to continue to push for a just recovery. And there's just so much amazing work in our movements to resist capitalism and to create a more just and equitable economic system. So it's really important to fight things like privatization, corporatization, land theft, white supremacy, and racism, and so much more. And I know a lot of folks on this webinar are doing that really important work. But I think it's also equally important to create the kind of communities that we want, which is what we're aiming to do at Biblioterre. So with that, I'm going to introduce our presenter, Jen Korish. Jen Korish believes in ecology, that we're all interconnected and interdependent. This belief has guided her focus in studying geography, food security, working with not-for-profits, youth organizations, and currently towards a social work degree. She's passionate about working with children and youth, specifically through garden and farm-based education programs, most recently with an employment and skills development farm project with youth in conflict with the law. She has a background as a farm manager and experience with various urban garden projects. She is excited to be part of Biblioterre and hopes to collaborate with local youth organizations to establish land-based empowerment-focused programming on site. So with that, I welcome Jen. I see all the names in the chat box, so thanks for doing that, everyone, and continue to introduce yourselves. So I'll pass it over to Jen.
Thanks, Emma, for the introduction, and also hi to everybody and welcome. Thank you for joining us today and for your interest in Biblioterre. We are definitely eager to share our project with more people and communities and to explore some of the foundations of our co-op as well as the current initiatives we're focused on. My pronouns are she, her, or they, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to represent Biblioterre today. I'm going to start by recognizing some of the implicit barriers in today's presentation, as well as some of the privileges that we must stress. We do not have an American Sign Language interpreter, so we were not promoting the webinar inclusively for folks with hearing needs. In the future, we do have a plan to organize ASL interpretation for our presentations. This is also a unilingual webinar. However, we have a francophone session coming in the near future. We also recognize the privileges in accessing a computer to participate in today's session. Lastly, it feels very important to acknowledge that while our current membership reflects some diversity, we are overrepresented by white, able-bodied, cisgendered people. And so inevitably this produces and embeds specific power imbalances, practices, and values in our co-op. This also has important implications, specifically as a land-based cooperative, in that it's with white settler privilege that we have access to land or the conversation about land in the first place. So throughout the presentation, I will address some of our strategies that link privilege to responsibility and how we plan to address the barriers to participation with us. Let's see here. A lot of dedicated work and love has gone into this project, and there are more details involved than I'll be able to cover today. So some of the topics may seem a bit broad. Here's the outline, but we are hoping to present a holistic overview of our approach and practices, while also sharing how interested folks could engage with us. And as Emma said, if there's anything you'd like more information on, we have made space for dialogue and questions at the end of the presentation. So as Emma mentioned, we promoted today's session as a tangible alternative to the systems of capitalism, inequity, and climate change. We shared our project this way because we believe in alternative systems and futures. The story we've been told about capitalism, racism, globalization, climate change, poverty, and violence is that they are inevitable, that these harmful systems are normal, and that they're a necessary byproduct of business as usual. Our project firmly stands against this myth, and that these situations are not inevitable. There are counter narratives and realities being lived and created by people every day. There is no single solution, but living in a community could be one approach, by which we mean establishing relationships to people and ecology built on trust, reciprocity, and mutual obligation. Trying to do this through our daily interactions and working towards our long-term initiatives and programs is how we're attempting to do this at Biblioterre. So who are we and how did we get here? A number of the original members have been collaborators and friends for a little over a decade, and many of us originate from the Niagara, Ontario area. Living in an intentional community was a vague but exciting idea for a way to practice our ethics and social justice. Since then, we've met more like-minded friends in the Outaouais and partners who share our drive towards living intentionally and ethically on rural land. In this time, many of us have pursued knowledge in various interdependent fields like holistic health, food security, Indigenous allyship, water sovereignty, land integrated building, and social and community justice, to name a few of the interests and skills of some of our members. So the current iteration of all of those passions has become Biblioterre. And about 3 years ago, came together more formally and starting to put these ideas on paper, shaping what would become the foundation and governance of our co-op. So helping to direct and shape our work, we have a vision and a mission within the co-op. And while these seem like short sentences, this took us a really long time to capture our identity and our goals in a concise way. So our vision reflects our ethics and ideals and further shapes the pillars and initiatives of Biblioterre. So they, like everything, are interdependent, they're relational, and our vision enables us to check in with ourselves and our core values over time and ask ourselves questions like, are we connecting to our core values? Or how do the next steps reflect our overall mission? And our mission statement, as you can see, is a simple and broad way for us to describe how we want to achieve and what we want to achieve throughout our project. Creatively, we refer to the project as a land library because Biblioterre intends to offer programs as well as workshops and classes to other ecological and socially conscious land-based initiatives so that they can run on site with a reduced carbon footprint and a reduced cost of operation. So trying to create a social economy. Further grounding and focusing our work, we have the 4 main pillars that you can see, and these support the vision and the mission. So the 4 pillars demonstrate more specifically what types of projects, initiatives, and systems will be relevant to the co-op. These are co-produced and help support us in our decision-making as the co-op evolves as well. And that you can see, as noted under the equitability pillar, within these practices, we maintain an awareness that people's social locations and their embedded privileges and oppressions determine how they are able to engage with the project. So practically, this influences our training sessions, housing, and on-site policies, which I'll discuss a bit further later in the session today. The initiatives further clarify our intentions and practices and draw upon the interests and experiences of our membership. Some of the projects are more broad and will take longer to implement, while some are more specific and could be implemented as soon as we're on a space. The libraries initiative is a way to describe the commons or the shared resources that we'll share at Biblioterre, like the travel, food, and tools that are shaped by our member interests. And as I shared, we all bring diverse knowledge and experience within the pillars, and that's going to guide the various projects. And as Emma said, for example, for me, I'm interested in linking urban youth with agricultural programming and skills training. I want to highlight one specific initiative, and I also want to recognize briefly that I know we recognize the word allyship is contested. It's the language that we've been using for the last few months, so we're definitely open to dialogue on that word, but this is going to be in some of our content to date. So the Sovereign Space Initiative is a shift in the way that we as settlers and non-Indigenous people approach the colonial legacy of land appropriation. This is a cornerstone of the work that we're doing and attempts to actively practice territorial acknowledgements by designating 1/2 of the land that we operate on as sovereign-led space by our local Algonquin community. So the land would be divided equitably in half, meaning we would share the land features of water, forest, and arable land, and Biblioterre would financially support the entirety or both spaces. Creative control and responsibility would be otherwise led by the Algonquin leaders or networks of their choosing, and it is with gratitude and solidarity for access to the land that we've connected to local Indigenous leaders to start building mutual consent and trust towards establishing this initiative on our future space. So how do we plan to do this? And how do we make decisions? And I want to share that we aim for our governance structure to reflect our vision and values. So within that, we have training, decision-making under sociocracy, the establishment of the land trust, and the overall cooperative structure. This is a brief overview of some of our trainings. So these are growing and evolving over time, and it is one of the ways we want to better practice inclusivity is through the trainings. We're also working to establish a diversity and inclusivity circle or committee who will help to shape the form, content, and requirements of our training. So upon joining, each member is asked to participate with each training within the first year of their membership. Trainings like these are a way for us to ensure our membership shares a common understanding of how privilege and oppression impacts our daily experiences. And so our hope is that the training will help us to collectively transform what are so often imbalanced relationships of domination and power towards relationships of mutual support and of trust. I'm going to highlight sociocracy as a form of our governance. It's going to be a brief overview. It's a really large, interesting topic, and it's an important part of the functionality of Biblioterre. And it was also something I had never heard of before I started working with our co-op. I've included a link to the website. So if you're interested in this topic, it's an excellent website, has lots of information, very detailed. So sociocracy is also known as dynamic governance because it's a non-hierarchical way of decision-making, and it's designed to empower people's ability to stay informed while understanding the information flow of our decision-making process or within any organization. So as you can see by the picture, sociocracy is organized into circles, which are well-defined and have all the power for their particular focus. So in sociocracy, this means they have a distinct aim or goal under which they have the full scope of decision-making power. For example, this webinar was prepared and delivered by our membership circle. And while the general circle was aware of our working process, through delegates, our capacity for decision-making was completely independent from the general circle. Because each circle has both a leader and a delegate, and this person fulfills the role of information sharing between the main circles and the sub-circles. So while power is decentralized, the information flow stays intact through the delegates and the leaders, as well as through record keeping like minutes. Also, sociocracy operates using consent for decision-making instead of consensus. This is defined as consent is defined as no objections. So this practice eliminates the use of veto for decisions, instead allowing for progress towards a goal based on someone's consent or openness to a given topic, including a dialogue about the limitations or the benefits of any given subject. It definitely takes some practice, but we've been working with this system for a while now, and in my experience, sociocracy does meet the goals that it attempts to do, which is it provides empowered and efficient decision making throughout our group. So the land trust, I just want to briefly mention that Biblioterre is also working with Protecterre. This is a Quebec not-for-profit who works with agricultural projects to establish long-term land trusts. An aspiration of our co-op is to protect the land we work on indefinitely, and this provides one possible avenue for that goal. We kind of think of it as another layer of protection for the land, and it's a way for us to take land out of the marketplace and establish it as a commons, in the commons as a common good. The last piece of governance to talk about is the Solidarity Co-op. So this year, Biblioterre registered as a Solidarity Co-op in Quebec and held our first AGM. We decided to form a cooperative because in Quebec there is a long legacy of cooperatives and community of cooperatives, and there's some amazing organizations like the Cooperative de Développement Régional Outaouais-Laurentide, or the CDROL. And the CDROL is basically like a meta community of cooperatives, and they're instrumental in helping us form our bylaws and directing us in how to shape our policies. And we also learned from them that we could register as a not-for-profit co-op. And we chose to form a solidarity cooperative because it allows us to offer the most diverse membership types for people to link with us as a cooperative. And within this model of governance, one member is entitled to one vote. Hope everybody's doing okay. I know this is a lot of information, and for me, the digital format can be a bit alienating in terms of connecting, so I am looking forward to our discussion. I wanted to briefly share this slide just to show that there are different ways to connect with us and engage with the content and the work that we're doing. I'm going to speak now more specifically about membership as a form of engagement. Biblioterre is a solidarity co-op, as I mentioned, and you can see the three main membership types: a worker, a user, or a support member. And this basically reflects that depending on your needs or your interests in the project, what type of membership you would take or have, and how that would allow you to participate. So whether you wanted to have a financially generating business, you might lean towards being a worker, or if you want to engage more in events and run some projects, you might be a user, and a support person is another possibility for engagement as well. So for membership, I wanted to share a little bit about shares. And Biblioterre is currently in its funding and membership phase of growth. And as such, we're working to establish equitable forms of investment and participation. So with that in mind, we've developed different shares and links to benefits to help establish a project and to diversify our membership. The 3 shares are described here: qualifying, startup, and an annual operation. And it's basically a way for us to organize our investments in the property and programs established by Biblioterre. In a way, the shares are like refundable donations because there are returns in terms of land access, as well as sociocultural and ecological returns on your investment, which is why we say we're putting the share back in shareholding. There are also certain benefits for startup and annual operation shares, which include the priority land rights when we are on a piece of property. We decided to link benefits with these to recognize the risk that people are taking investing in the early foundations of the co-op. In establishing these shares, we've struggled a lot with how this links power and privilege with money, and we're developing a couple of strategies to address this. Specifically, and similarly to the sovereign space, shareholders with priority rights will only make up half the available residential spaces on any given property. Shareholders, especially offsite support members, can also pay their benefits forward or sponsor folks who face systemic barriers to accessing or participating on the land. We're trying to establish practices of wealth redistribution within the community and link privilege to responsibility as much as we can. So the land where we want to be, where we want all this to happen. We've spent the last few months organizing ourselves to make an offer on a beautiful piece of land near Wakefield. It has tightened our systems and revealed a lot about how cooperatives can make an offer to buy a piece of property. Generally, we're looking for land near Wakefield because many of us reside here, and we're aware of the ongoing work within Wakefield as a community. Though, as the countryside gentrifies more and more, this is becoming a greater challenge for us to access. We're feeling confident that we'll find the right location for the project, and we are actively pursuing properties this year. So, as I mentioned before, we're still in our startup phase, but we've done a lot of the not very exciting work of solidifying and materializing the ethics and forming policies and writing our bylaws and registering as a co-op. That being said, we wanted to host the webinar to broaden the conversations we're having to embody solidarity with the amazing community members in the area who are practicing these counter narratives, who are practicing against the myth of inevitability. Biblioterre aims to be an adaptive movement. We want to center our voice, we want to center our work around the voices of the global majority. And we're doing this work because we want to listen and prioritize diverse voices within the development and the guidance of this project as a whole. I want to say thank you to everyone, and I really do appreciate you taking the time today and for your interest in our project. There are necessarily many approaches to living and centering equity and inclusion in our lives, and the community of Biblioterre is giving it a try. We look forward to continuing the conversation with you today and hearing your feedback and hopefully collaborating or conspiring with you in the future. We're going to host an informal meeting on July 9th to check in with folks again, and you can see the information there will be on our website. Thanks again, everybody.